Welcome back to Write Your Book with author Sharon Hughson. Today, we're going to be talking about your writing process. Yes, there are 4 steps to a writing process, but how does that translate when you're writing your book? Today, you'll find out. So, the 4 steps of the writing process are brainstorming, drafting, rewriting, and the revision and polishing step. But your process, how you do each of these things as you're writing your book, is going to be unique because how you think and how you process and how you work best is unique to you. So today, Sharon is going to share with you the way that she incorporates these steps into her fiction writing process. And she'll give you a few tips about how you might be able to change things up to work for you. So the first step was the brainstorm and pre-writing step. So this can be really short if you're writing a short story. In fact, I have used half of a notebook page to jot down ideas for a 10,000 word short story before, and it came out perfectly well. Did it need a little bit of work? Sure, but it was pretty much intact, wholly on the first draft with that little planning. Well, hello, if you're writing a 100,000 word novel, then you're going to need a lot more planning than that and a lot more pre-writing activity than that. So a lot of people get stuck finding the best idea for a book. So what I like to do with this is what I call my what if pages. So I would, at the top of the page, I have told you about my obsession for spiral notebooks, I believe. So at the top of the page in my idea generating spiral notebook, yes, I really have one, I would write the premise of the story that I'm thinking about. And then I would say, well, what if she got cancer? What if he had a job offer across the states? What if? And a lot of times the what if before would help you figure out the next what if. So for instance, what if he got a job offer across the country? What if she got a huge promotion for where they remained now? What if she is determined that she has to stay here because that's the best thing for her career, blah, blah, blah. So obviously you can tell I'm throwing out some romance things. That is where I was published first, was in romance. But it would work for anything, any genre that you're writing, to just keep jumping off for what if. If you can get several pages of what ifs that connect together to make one story, you're probably pretty solid on being able to write a novel. However, if you can't really come up with conflict, or you run into some spots where you seem to bog down and go, okay, but then I don't know how that would get me to the end of the story based on what my premise is. Okay, then you need to go back to the drawing board, make sure you have it. So I am going to talk about story structure in a few weeks, and I'll talk more about that specifically, how to make sure you have all the points you need. The other thing for pre-writing that you will need if you're writing a novel is character development sheets. So it's really important that you know the basics about your character, what they want on the surface, and then what their deepest heartfelt desire is, what the lie is they believe that's keeping them from getting that thing they desire more than anything in the else, and what fear that produces, because they will be trying to not get in the situation where they have to face down that fear. And your story premise should make them have to confront that fear so they can grow and do something at the end of the story that they could not at the beginning of the story. That is a great character arc that you would want, a positive arc, if they are at a better place. All right, so draft 1, brainstorming. I like to do it by hand. A lot of people do it on the computer. There are sites on the computer, some free, some paid, that would help you brainstorm and pre-write and outline and make sure you have everything you need for a book. I've talked before about One Stop for Writers. They have a lot of great things on that website, but there are also just, storygenerator.com, I think, is one, and it will just throw up a lot of different story ideas for you, and you can go, hey, wait, and then sit down and brainstorm that. So the second step is the drafting phase. Now, I'm a fast drafter. What does that mean? That means I sit down and I just crank it out. I crank out the fast draft as quickly as I can because the story's in my mind. I know what I want to do. When I was writing novels, I would try and stop in the middle of a scene so that next day I would know right how I want to get going so that I would be able to roll on. But a lot of people draft slowly. A lot of people write a chapter one day, and then the next day, the first thing they do is they go back and they revise that chapter, and then they write the next chapter, okay? So that is combining a couple of different phases, but that helps some people. One of the coaching clients I worked with, that was the only way she could move forward, is if she went back to yesterday's and went, yep, it works, yes, okay, and tweak it how she wanted, and she knew then what she needed to write for the next day. It helped her get back into the storyline, if that makes sense. So that's fine. What is the process that works for you? One thing she has learned is that just because she rewrote it or revised it a little bit during the drafting phase, that doesn't mean it's a final draft. So that is a mindset you're going to have to get. Most authors that I know, and I know quite a few published authors, some even best-selling authors, do not have a first draft that is ready to go. Okay. Most of them have a first draft that needs a lot of work. Why? Because there's 2 more phases in the writing process. So you figure out what works for you for drafting and try a lot of things out. Try stopping in the middle of a scene to see if that helps you. Try, reading over what you did the day before you start writing, see if that helps you. You don't have to make any changes. The reason I recommend not making changes is because you don't know where the story's going to go yet. So you're not really sure how you should change it. So don't worry about tweaking sentences or making things sound better because you might not keep it. And the thing about it is, if I've spent a lot of time perfecting a scene and then later I realize, that scene is not even needed, I need to cut it. It's really hard to cut something to kill my darlings, as Stephen King says, because I spent a lot of time and effort making that scene lovely and wonderful, and now I don't want to cut it. I want to hold on to it forever. So that is why I don't do that in my drafting phase. All right, now the third step, is revising or rewriting. All right. E.B. White is famous for saying, all writing is rewriting. And I like it because in a way it's true. Even the first time I'm drafting a story, Susan May Warren calls that telling yourself the story. Tell yourself the story. I'm telling myself the story on the page. So I'm rewriting what is in my mind onto the page. All right. And then in this phase of the writing process, when you are actually rewriting, most people suggest that you take a break from your first draft, before you start rewriting. The reason is so you can get some distance. A lot of times we're so excited and we're like, all right, now this is going to be the best. It's going to be so perfect, blah, blah, blah. And so we aren't at a place where we can see what needs work, see what needs to be rewritten. And you need to be at that point where you aren't seeing it as golden. You're seeing that it does need work, that there are plot holes, that the scenes aren't as developed maybe, or don't have as much tension as what they need. For me, it's I don't have enough emotion. I probably don't have enough description. Those are the 2 things that I am really lean on when I fast draft. That's one reason I can write a fast draft, because I don't have to sit and picture, okay, how's it all going? I just write down the basics of what is happening in the scene. And sometimes there's a lot of emotion because I can feel it as I'm drafting. Other times it needs to be most of the time it needs to be deepened. I need to increase the visceral sensations so that my reader can be part of the story, because the more that you make them feel, the more they will want to keep reading. So rewriting, this means the first step for me is I read through the whole draft, and I have a notebook and the hard copy, or what I've begun doing lately is a PDF that I can mark up using actually my finger to write on it. And I have some symbols that I use. This is boring. This needs to be developed. A big old circle. What? There's something missing here. You need something to connect this up, etc., etc. And then I can sit down with my notes and open up my file and start rewriting it scene by scene. So for me, rewriting it might involve a lot of cut and paste it into my saved document, because I always save everything I cut. You never know when you might want to use that for something. But quite a few people, actually, I'm a little bit shocked by this, for them, rewriting is they open up a new blank document and they start over, because now they have a clearer vision of what their story is. So, and for me, you go, oh, revision, a new vision. And that's the next thing. The next phase is step 4. So if you have a hard time rewriting because the words are there and all you want to do is edit them, is polish them, and you can't really add new words, then you might be the type of person who has to actually rewrite from scratch, which can be really daunting if you've already written 80,000 words and you're shooting for 100,000. Now you have to write 100,000 again. So just a thought. Hopefully you will not be someone who has to do from scratch. Unless you're a fast writer, then maybe it won't be a big deal. All right, so the 4th step is revision and polishing. So I read something recently that, and I can't remember the source, that said revision is just what it is. Revision your story. Vision your story again. So I like that, but I feel like that is something for me that happens at the rewriting phase, that I have that new vision and re-envision how I want the story to go. And when I get to the revision phase for me, step 4 of the writing process, I have a solid story. What it needs now is to get tightened. It needs to get prettified. It needs to get good enough so that I'm ready for another person to read it. And just as a side note, usually I would send my draft to my beta readers after step 3. So I would rewrite it, and then I would go through and just do a quick edit to make sure, I got rid of all the typos and blah, 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 misspellings, all that stuff. So it'd be just a quick run through edit. And then I usually wait for beta reader feedback before I go into step 4 of the writing process, which is revision and polishing. Now, a lot of these steps are one and done, okay? But step 4, I know authors who go through that manuscript 8 times at step 4, okay? And each time they go through, they're looking for something else that they're going to do to it. They're looking for something else they're going to do to it. And the very last time through, they're proofreading it to make sure that everything is polished and there aren't any typos and everything's exactly how they want. And then they hit submit to their editor, their agent, their publisher, okay? Or if they're self-publishing, to their editor, who's gonna get it all perfect to go, ready to go. Because of course, we would never think of self-publishing without having a professional editor go over our manuscript first. So for me, revision is 3 steps usually. So the first time I incorporate all the beta feedback that I think merits it, and then I go through scene by scene and I tighten it. I change it up. I grab my thesaurus and change out words if I don't feel like they're powerful enough. I do all that stuff. Make sure every scene has tension. I have a thing called a scene tracker, and that's what I use for this phase to make sure that every scene has the tension that it needs, and that it also doesn't end where my reader could shut the book, but there's also something new introduced to make them want to keep going. Oh, well, what about that? Oh, what about that? Okay. And then I print it out and I read it out loud and I edit. Your ear will hear stuff that your eye will not see. Now, I know people who have their word processor, I think even Word will do this now, read the manuscript to them. And then they are working on it at the same time. If that works for you, that's good. I also tend to not be able to see mistakes on the screen that I will be able to see in a hard copy. So a lot of times that is what I need, that step. And then I enter all those changes in, because remember, I've done it by hand. And then the final step is I go through and I polish it. Read through it, just straight through. It might be fast, where I'm just marking little things that I fix up. Again, this is another phase that's nice to do on your e-reader or your iPad, your tablet. That's what I use it on, with a PDF. So you can just hit highlights and maybe make a comment about what you want to change, and then you go and change it. One thing I want you to remember is that every time you make a change in your manuscript, you could add an error. All right. And this is something that used to just completely freak me out, because I'm like, oh no, because whatever. That's why you have editors, my friend. And I talked about them last week, the different types of editors. And so if you didn't see that, I hope you'll take a glance at that. So how will you incorporate your personality into your writing process? I would love to hear about it. Brainstorming, pre-writing, how do you do that? What does that look like for you? Do you write an outline during this time? Step 2, drafting. Are you a fast drafter, or do you have to go slow by slow? Do you have to read what you wrote yesterday? Then rewriting. Can you rewrite when you have a document there and actually make substantial changes to it? Or do you need to start from scratch? And then step 4, revision, which is at least 3 steps, 3 times through of revision. Big revisions, editing for prettiness, and then polishing to make sure that you haven't used the wrong word and all the grammar stuff is correct. And so if you are someone who uses Pro Writing Aid or Grammarly, it would be before this polishing step that you would copy and paste your document into Pro Writing Aid or Grammarly and let it make suggestions for you. Okay, so those are the 4 steps. I would love to talk about your writing process. If you haven't already, you can find the Write Your Book Nook group link in the comments below. You could subscribe to my newsletter. You can visit my website. There's a form there that you can contact me and say, hey, da, da, da. Yes, I would love to get comments turned on here, but until my channel has 1,000 subscribers, that doesn't happen. So if you want to talk to me, we have to use one of those other avenues, and I really do want to hear from you. So until next time, keep writing, my friend, because your story matters.